Hey guys, so today we're learning lesson 7.1. We're starting chapter 7, which is about area, surface area, and volume. So we're talking about some geometry here. This first lesson is over lesson 7.1. It starts on page 285 in your book, and today is April 1st. Happy April Fool's Day. So make sure that you are following along in your book. You have your paper, you have your pencil, so you can take notes with me, and so that you can also do the practice problems. So that's going to be important as well. A vocabulary term as we talk about area and different shapes that we need to make sure that we understand is what a polygon is. And a polygon is a closed figure Your book says a polygon is a closed figure in a plane that is made up of 3 or more line segments that intersect only at their endpoints. So we will just say a closed figure with 3 or more line segments that only intersect at their endpoints. So what that means is it's a closed figure. So a polygon is not something like this because it's not closed. That is not a polygon. A closed figure means it's something like this that's closed. 3 or more line segments. So a triangle has 3, or it could have more. That's a polygon. Line segments too, so making sure that they're all lines. This is not a polygon because that is not a line segment. And only intersect at their endpoints. So do you see that these don't cross at any other time? This shape is not a polygon because it intersects at other points. So that is not a polygon. So now that you understand what a polygon is, parallelograms, rhombuses, triangles, trapezoids, kites, rectangles, squares, those are all polygons that you are familiar with. So what we're going to talk about today is getting the formula for area of a parallelogram. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we understand the formula for area of a rectangle, and then also what a parallelogram is. So back up with me and let's talk about polygons, and let's talk about 4-sided figures. So 4-sided figures are called quadrilaterals or quadrangles. Quadrilateral or quadrangles. So a quadrilateral or a quadrangle is a 4-sided polygon. We will talk about different quadrilaterals throughout this chapter. We'll talk about trapezoids, kites, rhombuses, things like that. Today's lesson, we're talking about parallelogram. So a type of quadrilateral, it'll come off and branch to parallelogram. It branches off into other things too, but parallelogram is what we're focusing on today. All right, and what a parallelogram is a parallelogram has 2 sets of parallel, two sets of, let me rewrite that for you, parallel lines. 2 sets of parallel lines. So a rectangle, a square, are all parallelograms. So this could look like a parallelogram because this side is parallel with this side is parallel with this side. All right, a rectangle is a parallelogram. To be a rectangle, you just have to have 4 right angles. A rhombus is a parallelogram. A rhombus is 4 equal sides. Four equal sides. And then if a rectangle and a rhombus got together, they would make a square. 4 right angles and 4 equal sides. That is a square. A square has to have 4 right angles and 4 equal sides. A rectangle just has to have 4 right angles. Okay, so now that we understand some terminology here, make sure that you have this in your notes. You can refer to it later. So if I reference a rhombus, you understand that it has 4 equal sides. If I reference a rectangle, you understand that a square is a rectangle, because just to be a rectangle, you only need 4 right angles. So making sure that you understand this terminology. A parallelogram just has 2 sets of parallel lines. This right here is a parallelogram. It's not a rectangle or a square or a rhombus, but it's still a parallelogram. So this is what we're focusing on today. And I actually have a parallelogram written, cut out right here that we're going to look at. And I'm sorry, it's white on a white counter. So let's look at this parallelogram. And if we want to find the area of this parallelogram, okay, finding the area of a rectangle, we all can remember area of rectangle is base times height. Okay, area of that rectangle here, base times height. So if I have 5 meters here and 2 meters here, the base and the height form a right angle. 5 times 2 is 10. And then your units are meters squared. So for area, your units are meters squared. Or your units for area are units, whatever they are, feet, inches, meters squared. The reason for that is because if you have 5 meters times 2 meters, you're multiplying meters times meters, and we know that we represent repeated multiplication with an exponent. So meters squared. All right, so keeping along with this and knowing that that base and the height have to form a right angle, have a right angle. How would I find the area of this parallelogram here? Again, I need to find that right angle. So if this down here was my base, where is my height going to be that would form a right angle with this? Look at the lines. Do you see that this line right here forms a right angle with the base? Right here is a right angle. So I don't care what this distance is. I don't care what this distance is. I just need to multiply my base times my height, and that would give me my area. The reason this works is I can actually cut this parallelogram and make this into a rectangle. So I'm going to cut it right here. I'm going to cut this part off. And I'm not changing area. Area is the space inside. I'm not changing the space inside. It's still my parallelogram. I'm just going to take this and slide it over here. And I've made myself a nice rectangle. So when you're finding the area of a parallelogram, you multiply the base times the height. And again, I didn't change the amount of space. I just simply moved this over to kind of make that parallelogram into a rectangle. That's why that base times height formula works. Base times height. And you have to look for that right angle. That base and that height form the right angle. Okay. Coming back to our notes here so we can write our new findings down. So we have area of a parallelogram is base times height, BH, base times height. And again, making sure that you know that those have that right angle that you're looking for. They have to have that right angle that you're looking for there. All right, so let's practice some. If we want to find the area of this parallelogram, if this is 10 inches, 6 inches, and 5 inches. What measurements do I multiply to do base times height? So you need to write the formula, area equals BH. Always write the formula whenever you're finding the area or surface area or volume. You always need to have the formula in your notes. We're looking at redoing some, well, not redoing, but changing some of the ways we do assessments. So we might have you like turn in your work or something. And so make sure that you have that formula in your work for every problem. Area equals base times height. So the base we can say is 10, and we're looking for those two numbers that form that right angle, not 6. 6 and 10 do not form that right angle. You're looking for 10 and 5. So 10 times 5, 50, and do not forget the units, because is it 50 inches, like a distance, or 50 inches squared, because we're talking about area. The space all inside here is 50 inches squared. Area is talking about the amount of space inside a figure. If we did perimeter, then we're talking about the distance around the outside of the figure. We're talking about area, the space inside, 50 inches squared. Let me give you a problem or two. Let me give you two problems to work through, two examples. Again, you want to make sure you write that formula, plug the numbers in, and then do the math. You have to do that for every problem, showing your work so we understand what numbers you multiplied to get your answer, making sure you're not doing 10 times 6, making sure you're finding and looking for that right angle. Okay, some of these might look a little bit different, but again, all you're looking for is that right angle. All right, let's do, there's one example, so pause and get your answer. Actually, I'm going to write another example here, so don't pause yet. Let me give you another example. Okay, now pause and do these two examples. Again, you're just looking for those right angles. Okay, so you should have paused and worked them out. Here you're looking for those two numbers that form a right angle. 3 and 7 form that right angle, so you should write area equals base times height equals 7 times 3 or 3 times 7. Commutative property says you could do either way. So 21 feet squared. Don't forget your units, feet squared. Here, this one looks different because this is a little addition that you're added here. You're not actually adding that triangle, you're just adding that to show, hey, there's your height, that's your distance. So they can show it inside the figure like this or like this. They also can show it outside the figure like this. In your book, when the pictures look so pretty and colorful, they show them like this. So you see how that's on the outside of the figure? This is inside the figure. Here's some more examples. This one is inside the figure. This is outside the figure. And this is inside the figure. So all you're looking for those two numbers that form that right angle to multiply. That base and that height. All right, so here you should multiply, write your formula, area equals base times height, 6 times 5, 30, again, your units, inches squared. All right, so hopefully you got those two correct. That would be exciting. They can make these more complicated just by making the numbers more complicated and complicating like your computation work. We can put fractions in there. We can put decimals in there. But that's no problem because you already know how to multiply fractions and decimals. So it's not going to be that big of a deal to you. You know you just multiply base times height. Okay, so one's a fraction or one's a decimal. Let's review over how to do that. If we have a parallelogram like this, okay, so here's our parallelogram that we want to find the area of. If our up here is 7.5 centimeters, and then I'm going to draw right here, This is 3 centimeters, showing you that that's a right angle there. Okay, so this time they only gave you the 2 numbers. Those are the 2 numbers that would form the right angle. So you multiply that. Remember when you're multiplying, so area equals base times height, area equals 7.5 times 3. Now when you're multiplying mixed numbers, you have to make this into an improper fraction. So you would have 7 times 2 plus 1, 15 over 2 times 3 over 1. 15 times 3, 45 over 2. And then simplify that to 22.5 centimeters squared. So again, the same process, you're just multiplying base times height, but you can have fractions, you can have decimals. So, you know, you can just make the problem a little bit more complicated that way. Let's see some other problems. There are just some word problems, and then we'll practice a couple of those, and then you'll be set to attempt the homework check. If for some reason Schoology is not working, pull up that document that I emailed you or Mr. Chine emailed you on Monday, and there are some bookwork problems that you could work through. I did post the answers to all the homework Chapter 7 bookwork problems on Schoology. So, but if Schoology is not working, you can't access it. But you could check it later. So you could work through those specific problems that I listed as optional homework on that Chapter 7 plan that shows you what the week's plan is. If Schoology is not working, you can at least access this video and then do practice problems from your book. And then you can do that homework Schoology check later if it's working or not. Mr. Chine and I can obviously work with you on that if there's technical difficulties. I want to look at one problem that, what if you know that the area of a parallelogram is 28 meters squared. And if you know that the base is 4 meters, what is the height? Some of you might already be able to figure that out. Okay, so think about it for a second, pause and think. All right, so the area formula for area is base times height. The area you're given this time is 28. So you know that 28 equals 4 times the height. 4 times what gives me 28? You know how to solve these types of problems. They're simple one step. Draw yourself a shelf. The inverse of multiplication is division. So 7 is your height. So your answer would be 7 meters. Or you just simply can realize that, hey, 4 times 7 is 28 and get that. So you can work backwards as well. Okay, I'm going to pause here. This is the video. This is the lesson. You can, if Schoology is working, you now will do the Schoology homework check. If Schoology is not working, you do the optional, which is not optional, Schoology is not working, but the book work, and then you can try Schoology later. This is lesson 7.1, finding area of a parallelogram. Please, Mr. Chine and I will be on the chat on the Schoology conference if you have questions.